Well, I'd like to welcome everybody this evening. My name is Bill Freeman. I'm a board member of IFWA. And a little bit about my history is in the forest industry is that in 2000, I bought an old CYO camp in Brown County, Indiana. It totaled about 160 acres. Since then, we've grown our property to about 300 contiguous acres. In 2005, we built a house on the property and moved there permanently. However, after purchasing our land in 2000, we started attending seminars to learn a little bit more about property, having been city slickers all our lives. And we realized that for the good of our forest management and to be better stewards of the land, we needed to be more active. Translated, that means we need to learn a lot. So in 2008, my wife and I, after attending several seminars, got an email about an annual meeting for an organization called the Indiana Forest and Woodland Owners Association. The program sounded good, so we attended, and by golly, that 2008 annual meeting hooked us. I became a board member the next year in 2009 for District 2 and have served as such ever since. Now, it was significant to me for four main reasons. I get to be around like-minded folks who care about the property that they own and the environment in general, and they base their practices on scientific research and practices. So that's very important to me that they do the right thing. An organization that stays abreast of the legislation that directly or indirectly affects the forests or the forest industry. This is kind of behind the scenes stuff that most members don't ever see or know goes on, but an extremely important aspect for independent forest owners in Indiana. Number three is IFWA puts on webinars much like you're signed up for today. The annual meeting that I described is always very good with great speakers, so I urge you to attend that. Even if you're not a member, you can join then. They give updates on various other organizations, not just our organization, but other organizations' programs that are related to the forest industry throughout the state of Indiana. And my fourth big reason is I go back to number one, like-minded folks. It's just I get to interact with like-minded folks and learn from them. And IFWA, they're just plain good people. So what does IFWA do? I'd like to read a statement now that we have developed to try and partially explain what IFWA does. The Indiana Forest and Woodland Owners Association educates about and advocates for responsible forest conservation and management. We support scientific best practices to achieve objectives of clean water, wildlife habitat, soil protection, native species diversity, timber production, recreation, carbon sequestration, and many other aspects. Membership is available to woodland owners or anyone interested in forestry. We provide fundamental learning opportunities such as this webinar, forest field days and workshops, representing woodland owners' interest in the state legislature and with state agencies, and share regional and national resources through our affiliation with the National Woodland Owners Association. So I invite you to visit our website, which is ifwoa.org, to learn more about IFWA and become a member. Membership is $50 per year or $135 for 3 years, and I think it is very well worth it. I'd like to introduce Liz Jackson, who is our executive director, and she'll introduce the program for tonight. And again, thank you for all being here.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that and appreciate your support. I'm Liz Jackson. I'm the executive director of IFWA. We're excited to have you join us today to hear from LeAnne Barta on Be Tick Aware. This is a topic that's dear to my heart. My own son was diagnosed with Lyme as a child, and fortunately it was diagnosed and he recovered very quickly. But I have friends and acquaintances who have not been so fortunate and have suffered debilitating effects from tick diseases. It's an insect we're all well aware of, but I know I underestimate my risk, and you may too. So I'm pleased to hear from LeAnne to make sure we're more aware of the risks. Before I pass it on to her, I'd like you to remind you to keep your microphone muted and your video off to eliminate distractions. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box at any time, and I will moderate your question at the end. This presentation will be recorded and announced when it is available in a few weeks. Some of you may have sat in on the Wild Orchids webinar in January, and I don't quite have that one ready, but I expect to have that one in the next 2 or 3 weeks as well. LeAnne Barta is co-founder and president of Indiana Lyme Connect, as well as leader of the Indianapolis Support Group. Her and her husband know firsthand the difficulty of Lyme diagnosis and Lyme's devastating effects on their children. She completed her Master's of Science in Communication Disorders from the University of Texas at Austin, with a concentration on deafness, brain injury, and language development. After university, she moved to Indianapolis, and after working in a variety of medical and academic settings, she devoted her energy to raising and homeschooling her 5 children, as well as volunteering in a variety of local and international organizations. When Lyme disease hit her family, she became a full-time caregiver and put her research and advocacy skills to use to advocate and care for her own young adult children. Indiana Lyme Connect was born out of this difficult season as LeAnne saw the need to serve others with tick-borne illness. One of her greatest joys has been watching each of her children hold on to their faith while persevering through tremendous losses and pain for over a decade to regain a new normal of health and independence. LeAnne lives in Indianapolis with her husband of 40 years and her son's retired ICANN dog, Tracker. And now I'll pass it on to you, LeAnne. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Well, hello. As she said, I'm LeAnne, and I'm with Indiana Lyme Connect, and I'll refer to it as ILC as we go forward. I really thank you for having me join you tonight. And this evening, it's about sharing a little bit of my story to give a foundation to share about our organization's story and how it can relate to you. So, as she said, Lyme disease hit our family. And up until 2010, to be quite honestly, I knew nothing about Lyme disease. But in the summer of 1995, my husband and I took our excited 3 young children to the shores of southern Lake Michigan, had a great outing, came home, and within 2 days, all of our children were showing very strange symptoms, became very sick, and 2 of them ended up in the hospital, one at Riley. And it was the next 9 months that we were combating an infection, but no one could figure it out. And then fast forward, the next 15 years, things started to happen. We were so strange, we became so accustomed to strange neurological symptoms and illnesses, but we just continued on with pursuits academically and athletically. And then all of a sudden, things went from bad to worse. One child woke up one morning and was stumbling and couldn't walk on his own. He was losing consciousness when he would stand, started having seizures, heart rate problems, body tremors, excruciating pain. He lost the ability to read, and he couldn't tolerate light and sound, even though he was a musician. So all of that stopped. So we went to about 6 specialists. Doctors were baffled, and parents were frantic trying to find answers to find out how to care and get help for our children. And to make matters worse, we really experienced trauma just as we were in the dark, the medical providers were as well. And some actually said that we were crazy and that it was all in our kids' head. So we felt really alone, isolated, and scared. And all of a sudden, we had another child, and another child exhibiting symptoms. But we were really blessed in a way because one of our children ended up on the East Coast to attend college. Shortly after arriving, he started deteriorating to the point where he couldn't function. He started having Bell's palsy, double vision, profound fatigue, and again, no diagnosis. But then a professor introduced us to a doctor. And that doctor's visit to an MD well-versed in Lyme disease brought us the diagnosis that had eluded everybody for the last 15 years. And it really was of Lyme disease and a whole host of what are called co-infections. And was amazing by this chart, you can see it. It explained 100% of the 40 plus symptoms my kids were dealing with. And other my children were even worse shape than this. So the story is all the years of misdiagnosis were over, but unfortunately, the disease wasn't easy to cure, as Liz just told you. It advanced to the worst form, the neurological late-stage Lyme disease. So the treatment was wicked, expensive, and it's taken years. But the good news is my kids have fought, and now after 6 + 7 years, they're all in getting well and finding a new sense of normal. So we're really thankful. But why do I tell that story? Well, in the midst of it, we started getting phone calls from other families. And this man, Andrew, who was a husband, father, and a pilot, he contracted Lyme disease from mowing his lawn on the northwest side of Indianapolis. Same story, flu-like symptoms, didn't expect a tick encounter, and wasn't diagnosed until his too became late-stage neurological Lyme. And that is when it gets really hard to treat. So we saw the need of trying to put tools together in the hands of Hoosiers who, like us, were really unaware that ticks really presented a threat or that Lyme disease was even here. And so we needed to come together, resolve a complex problem, and that is how ILC was born. And it really sets the stage for what we're going to talk about later. And I decided I want to just share a little bit about our organization because it's going to tell you the parts for the story to come that I'm going to share. So really what we're about is education. We want to educate Hoosiers about the need, like you, to think about ticks and the diseases they carry, but we needed tools. So we were really blessed. As you see this little tick, round red tick over here, we partnered with Tick Encounter, and they're at the University of Rhode Island. And we met a Dr. Tom Mather. He's known as the tick guy. He's actually been on the news. You might have seen him on ABC, NBC, different ones. And he's really one of the nation's leading authority on ticks, but also on preventing Lyme disease. In fact, he has an outdoor lab, and he is passionate about finding easy ways and that are science-based that are going to help prevent tick bites and tick infections. So that's one of the things we did. And then in the middle picture, we started getting busy about education, and we're part of passing the first Lyme-focused House resolution bill in the state, which began conversations with government officials around the state of Indiana about ticks and tick-borne. And then the proclamation, we've been working with the governor's office, and each May we join the rest of the nation in declaring May as Lyme Awareness Month. So we do all these things and show up at fairs and Indiana State, the Flower and Patio Show, with one focus in mind, and that really is to educate, just like tonight. And then the second part is the biggest obstacles, if you heard in my story, is that trying to get an early diagnosis or figure out what is going on. So the data is really eye-opening. So 72% of those that have Lyme were misdiagnosed, and 51% saw it took over 3 years to get a diagnosis. And 51% took more than 5 medical specialists before they were diagnosed, and 70% were not diagnosed until the late stage, like my family. So ILC really is looking a way to change that. And so one of the ways we do that is we provide financial assistance for healthcare providers to attend accredited courses on Lyme disease. And as you see in a picture here, we have offered and sponsored 2 accredited medical continuing education courses on diagnosing Lyme. And from these efforts, now in Indiana, compared to when we started way back when, there's been over 100 Indiana healthcare professionals that have been introduced to these tools that are out there for correct evidence-based diagnostic and treatment. So we're really excited about that. We're starting to see a change. And the last part, as you can imagine, was to support those that have it. Just like us, they feel alone and they're not sure where to go. So we help get them on the road and provide tools. We are not a medical organization, but we will point them to resources. So, and we do all of this. We're a nonprofit, all volunteer. So it's all run with people probably just like me that have encountered this. We also have support meetings and a monthly newsletter that you can sign up for. But the good news before we get to the rest of the evening, that changes are happening. We are seeing easier access to care, a little bit of that. And we're seeing people get treated at the very beginning of a tick bite and being more aware. So why do I bring this up? If my family had been tick aware and really understood the threat of even Lyme disease in Indiana, we would not have experienced what we did. And I don't want that to happen to you. And by the fact that your organization deals with forest and woodlands, you are in a higher percentage for encountering a tick bite, so, or even Lyme disease. So hopefully with that background, you'll consider a little bit more about prevention and been willing to maybe see how much you're willing to change a little bit in order to have prevention strategies that will help you not encounter a tick. So I'm probably speaking to the choir. You guys probably know all of this, but just in case, it's really important. Different ticks have different diseases. So the three main ones in Indiana are the ones here, the black-legged, the American dog, and, sorry, I've lost, my screen's going blank on this side, hold on. The Lone Star tick, sorry about that. So we're just going to go through this real quickly. You can go into Purdue Extension, you can go to our website or the Tick Encounter to get a lot more in depth. But basically, and probably in Brown County and others, the most frequently encounter of the hard ticks in human and dogs will be the American dog tick. And again, just to note, there's the adult stage, the nymph stage, and the larva stage. And so all of these ticks will have those three stages. But why is that important? Again, different ticks carry different diseases. So this one of the ones it carries is Rocky Mountain spotted fever. May have heard that in the news a few years ago, the sad thing about the 2-year-old girl in Plainfield who lost her life from that disease because of misdiagnosis. Secondly, your leukiosis is another one that is common that you will hear about. And just thought it would show up. There's the rash that comes from the Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Pretty easy to identify, I would think. Secondly, that the most second encountered frequency of a tick would be the Lone Star tick. And again, you have the female, the nymph, and the larva. And those are, according to Purdue, anyway, their research, it says it's much more prolific in the southern part of Indiana. And so you can get diseases like Borrelia, Lone Starry, tick paralysis, and others. And then lastly, which we're going to really be focusing on, while all ticks are bad, we are going to focus on this, the black-legged tick, or AKA the deer tick. And just to point out that the number one disease that we're talking about here is Lyme disease. And what is it? It's a vector-borne disease by the Borrelia bacterium, which is spread by the deer tick. And it is the most common vector-borne disease in the United States. So, and we're going to see that that is even changing, becoming more prevalent. So besides, you heard me talk about co-infections. When these ticks bite, many of them have more than one infection in it. So human babesia is another common human anaplasma, and others. So here is a sign of a tall tale diagnostic tool. It is the bullseye's rash, which most people are pretty familiar with, having that strong red center, the light skin, and then another red. So different ticks have different diseases. So it seems like they might be easy to identify, but just imagine that getting engorged with a blood meal, it's attached to you or your dog, and you take it off and it's changed shape, it's changed color. So it's not as easy to ID, or at least for me, especially when it's at the nymph stage, which is this tiny little stage. But a great tool that we have found is called Tick Spotters. And this is free. All you have to do is type in Tick Spotters on your phone, and it'll show you how to take a picture from the top, and you submit it, and in 24 hours, they will respond. And so it's really a great tool if you want to know what was on you and what bit you. That's a great tool. And not only do they tell you what it is, but they tell you how long they estimate that it had been attached. And we'll see a picture of that later on. But the bigger thing is, we know all ticks are bad. They can all carry different diseases that we don't want. But it is only the deer tick that carries the Lyme disease. So knowing what is bitten you will help you figure out symptoms and signs if you end up having a tick. So here's the bad news. The first is that the tick population of these black-legged ticks is increasing every single year. So the problem is only getting worse. This here is, that's a picture of Dr. Mather, the tick guy from the University of Rhode Island. Again, that we're partnering with him to learn and get the latest on research. And as he says, there are more ticks in more places and likely more to come. And it is spreading. So if you notice on this map, let me see if I can get that here. This is CDC, and the red is the darker the red, that means the more frequency that you will find those ticks. And if you look, you have basically 100 years, almost roughly. And then you have from 1997 to 2015. And you can see that, as he says, there's more ticks and they're spreading and there are more places. So you can see that even the Midwest, upper Midwest and the Great Lake region, it's increasing. But bear in mind that this is only based when they have surveillance. And we in Indiana, there has not been much surveillance that's taken place. It is very lacking. In fact, I don't know if you tuned in to the Indianapolis Public Broadcasting, but in January 19th, you can type it in, but it's lack of data info leads Indiana doctors unprepared for more tick diseases. And so there needs to be more prevalence. We know that the state would like it. We know Purdue would like it. And we'll talk about ways you can help with that if you're interested. But we do know that it is in Indiana, and more ticks are bringing it. But something else that's interesting, besides the black-legged tick increasing, I should put black-legged tick. This is not all ticks. It is also, they're finding it in urban areas. That was a surprise to me. I always thought you had to be in the woods and the forest in order to get it, but they're finding it that it is in urban areas. And we're going to, the part of the answer lies in the fact that housing is stretched into the forests and woodlands, taken over environments and where deer used to be and other wildlife. So something else, pay attention that deer tick are now in all 50 states. And this is an outstanding number. Look at this. The CDC reports 476,000 new cases of Lyme disease annually. That is more cases than breast cancer, prostate cancer, and HIV put together. So we're talking just shy of 500,000 new cases annually. So all this is all to say we all need to be tick aware when we venture into tick habitat. But besides understanding the type of ticks and understanding their disease they carry, being wrong about a tick can also lead to Lyme disease. So let me share with you a few myths that I didn't understand the answers to this. Here's the first one. As mentioned previously, the surveillance does lag in Indiana, but in other states as well. But we do know that it's here. Look at this map from CAPC. So CAPC is the Companion Animal Parasite Council. So when veterinarians they send in their ticks and their testing is going to and being captured by CAPC. And then each year they keep this map and you can see the counties that are in orange would be the most likely, meaning a greater prevalence of Lyme disease. And so you can see from this, it's an increasing problem. And in this circle, I don't know if you can read it. Let's see. At present, and this has been for the last 4 or 5 years I looked, so really 1 in 30 dogs is being tested for positive for Lyme disease in the state. So it's over 10,000 cases. So when we don't have a whole lot of information, we do know that it's here and we can see it even in the dogs. We also see that they give a map forecast every year. And as you can see, the Great Lake region is, some parts of it are red, and you have the Northeast. And then you look at Indiana, and we're in this yellow, in Michigan and Ohio. So once again, we see that we're not on the low end, we're on the middle to the middle high end. So it's not necessarily going to be an infrequent encounter with ticks increasing, but a more real possibility. So the second, which need to know, is that you must have a bullseye's rash to have Lyme disease. And that is not true. It's just simply not true. The good news is if you do get a bullseye's rash, that is diagnostic for Lyme disease. There is no other disease that is going to cause that. But according to the research, 50% of the people diagnosed with Lyme never even, they don't recall a tick bite, much less a bullseye's rash. So even if you don't have a classic rash, don't join the crowd and dismiss it. Pay attention, take a picture of it, and look for signs and symptoms. And then I'm going to show you also just briefly here, you can see that the rashes, there's the bullseye's rash on the left, but it can be not just a bullseye's rash, but a rash of any kind when you've been in tick habitat is something to pay attention to. Another myth, most, it should be most, sorry about that. Don't recall a tick bite. You don't have to recall a tick bite to have Lyme disease. So here we have the Indianapolis Indian mascot Boomer, and he's taking what we call our tick challenge. He has a magnifying glass, and this is what he's looking at, this bagel here, or it looks like a poppy seed bagel, but really, is it? So the answer is yes and no. The lighter color, the gray, are actually poppy seeds, and the darker are nymph size, the nymph stage of the black-legged tick. And so hence you can see how small they are. And the research just came out from Tick Encounter was that in our area, or the upper Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast, that 1 in 4 of these nymph ticks are infected with Lyme disease. So again, we need to pay attention. So if only 30 to 40 or 50% of people ever even remember a tick bite, how can that be? Do you have to recall a tick bite to have Lyme disease or any other thing? The answer is no. Number one, look how small they were, easily missed. Number two, the tick saliva has an antiseptic. So when it bites you, it's not like a mosquito bite that itches, it's numbing you, you don't feel it. And third, the location, the hair, it crawls, ticks go from the bottom up. They go from the ground up into the hairline in discrete areas. It's easy not to see it. So just because you haven't recalled a tick bite doesn't mean that you couldn't have Lyme disease or other chronic problems. Another one is I can't get Lyme disease in the winter. And this is a myth that needs to be dispelled, because if you're not expecting tick encounters in the winter, you're not going to go prepared with prevention measures. And you can be just wrong enough to get a high chance for hikers, dogs, hunters, foresters to contract Lyme. So this is a tick that was presented and brought into the tick spotters, and it's an adult stage deer tick. And every year these ticks become active after the first frost. They're not killed by freezing. It can be 10 degrees, 0 degrees. They're not killed by freezing. And they remain active on a winter day the minute it's above 32 degrees. So while you're out hiking on a beautiful sunny day or working, you may not think that you could be subject to a tick bite, but you can. And you could be caught off guard. So you want to learn tick prevention tips, and which we'll share in a minute, and use those even in the winter. And the last myth is you can only get Lyme disease if you go into the forest. And that's true. In the forest where you have moisture, you have leaf litter, and all that, ticks thrive, as does wildlife. And we know that the deer tick is, the deer is an important host in the chain, but so are small mammals. This is the white-footed mouse. And let's see if you can see in his ear there. It's pretty disgusting. These are engorged ticks. And then look at this bird over here. So once again, we can get ticks coming from in unlikely places. We get it in a bird feeder in an urban yard. The bird flies in, the tick drops off, and now we have the problem in the urban area. So there was a report of someone in Ohio who had a mouse entering their house, and guess what? It had a engorged tick, and it fell off. So there's ways that we can encounter Lyme disease through ticks in places other than just the woods. So you can see clearly you don't want a tick bite. Look at my story, other stories. And even the winter in the city, you could get a bite, but obviously it's going to be more in the area that your organization is passionate about. But the good news is tick bites and Lyme disease really are preventable. So I know that you guys are pretty tick aware because you're already here, and you understand the challenges of living, working, and playing in the forested areas and the woodlands. But there are some really good tick smart steps that I'd like to share with you to help reduce your chances of a tick bite. So normally I start with people, but because of where you're passionate about, I'm going to start with the habitat. Now, yes, this is a city and we're talking about the forest, but this chart has a lot to say to us of things that are important. I'm going to move this in here. Okay. First of all, just reducing the habitat in your yard. So if you have a home and you're surrounded by woods, trees, waterways, there are things you can do around your home proper. The first thing that they found in research is that the deer tick are not in the middle of the lawn that are cut and manicured, but they are in the borders of a yard. They're in the wooded areas, the ornamental plantings, the water edge, the forest trails, the grass fields, the gardens, anywhere where there's shade and leaves and high humidity. And so one of the things that they found, and this is number one on the graphic here. Okay, so, oh, I can't do that, sorry. Okay, let's move back in. Okay, so the first thing is this man spraying. So what they found is that the single most effective way to reduce a black-legged tick in your yard is by spraying insecticide. Now that doesn't seem very eco-friendly, but what they found is you don't need to spray an entire yard. You just need to spray a barrier, a perimeter between the grass and where the forest is. So, and where the shady areas are. So that's a great thing to know. If that's the single most important thing they found in research, then maybe it's something you really want to consider. The second are these leaf piles. Reducing leaf litter. If the more you reduce leaf litter, the less likely you will be dealing with ticks. So in the area around your home, you want to get rid of those leaves. The best way is to mulch them or to remove them. By blowing them into the forest and creating deeper piles, there was an article that came out, we have it on our website, that showed that the black-legged tick population exploded with that kind of environment. So when you're able, it's better to remove them or mulch them. But otherwise, at least getting them away from the house will help you with less opportunity for the deer tick. The other are these wood piles here. Taking things and moving them away from the house like wood pile. Think about stone walls, wood piles, things where mice like to go and other rodents. And they are carriers of ticks. So by removing them away and creating a safer place, that's a way to lessen your chance. And then the other is this brown area number 8. And so it's interesting, by putting a barrier of a minimum of 3 feet for your mulch beds going around, the ticks don't like the mulch bed. So by the time they go over it, it's drying them out. They don't like it. And so you're creating another barrier. And then another one is this number 4, this little tick tube. I don't know if you've heard of it. I only became aware of this about 3 years ago. Again, when Dr. Mather shared this with me and he shared a research article. But it's basically a tube and it's filled with, it looks like cotton that has been treated with permethrin. And with that comes mice will come in and they will grab the cotton and it won't hurt a mouse, but the ticks that are on the mouse, it will coat them and they will die. And then the cotton will go to their nesting areas, whether in the stone walls or in the wood pile or wherever they want to go under the leaf litter. And what it's happening is killing those ticks and it's stopping the next generation. So you can buy them on Amazon. There's different brands. One is called Thermacell Tick Control tubes. They're about, I don't know, under $20 for about 6 of them. So you may want to check that out. And just moving your recreational spaces away, if you have children, grandchildren visiting and friends, moving play areas away from the forest is a great way to help reduce encounters with ticks. So checking your pets. So we know that if you go to the vet, almost always they'll talk to you about Lyme disease, and they'll talk to you about, different methods, whether vaccines or pills to take, different things. But have you ever thought, if that dog gets a tick, a deer tick, and it comes back into the house and that tick falls off, now you can be exposed. So you want to protect your family. So here is, we talked about this tick spotters, and I'm going to show you, this is an example of it. So this tick was a 5-day engorged female black-legged tick out of Ohio. And that it was found in the bed. So it had been engorged for 5 days. So there are other ways that, we can be affected by the dog coming in. So how can you stop that? Well, thinking about grooming your pet, if they have been going on walks, if they have wandered into the leaf litter and you let them out the yard and they go, or you've been hiking, grooming them before they get in the vehicle, grooming them before they get in the home. That will help you reduce another tick encounter. Protect yourself. If there's any takeaway from tonight, it is this word permethrin. Permethrin is the thing that will kill a tick. And you may ask what I did. I thought, I am not putting anything on me that is a chemical. I don't want it because it's not safe. Well, interesting enough, it has been so safe that both, not only the EPA, but Tick Encounter went back and they redid the research, and it is externally safe for pregnant women, infant, toddlers, the armed forces use it. So it's a safe product. And what happens is that it takes, I don't know, I think it's like 6 inches for the tick to crawl across it and it will kill it. And yet it's safe. So that is a great thing to use, whether you work, play in these tick habitat areas. You want to think about getting that. You can get more information about the safety. We have it on our website. So as we talked about, ticks crawl up. So they start low and they crawl up all the way to the hairline. That's one of their favorite places. So this research study was done in an outdoor lab, and look at this. If you treat your shoes and socks with permethrin, you've reduced your tick bite chance by 74 times. That's amazing. And that's for the larvae and the nymph ticks that are at the ground level, and it's for the adult ticks. So if there's one thing you can do to create your first line of defense against a really near invisible invader when it's that tiny poppy seed, is to treat your shoes and your socks. And we'll talk a little bit ways that you can do that. But basically, learn a new tick habit. We in our house, the beginning of every month, we just spray our shoes, and we have permethrin treated socks. And we just do that every single month. It takes about 5 minutes and it'll last for 1 month. And that's a great way of insurance to reduce your opportunity to get a tick bite from a black-legged tick. So again, you can further increase your protection. See the shorts there? You add 5 times more opportunity to stop a tick bite. And so one of the things to notice with shorts is thinking if ticks are crawling on the skin, especially these little nymph ones, they're going to go under the short, not on the outside. So when you are treating them, you need to reverse them and spray the inside and then spray the outside. And then 3 times more for adding a shirt. So permethrin is your friend. But what about, think about this, think like a tick. Again, ground level, campers. A lot of them will spray the bottom of the tent and just the maybe up about 4 or 5 inches on the outside of it. Treating backpacks, anything that goes on the ground, that goes on a wood pile when you're stopping to hike. Hunters, the hunting game blanket, you can treat that. And then also your vehicle. Sawyer product really recommends that. I hadn't thought about it, but if you have been out working or playing and you get in your vehicle, the ticks are still there. They haven't attached more than likely, and you can have another barrier to prevent a tick bite. So how I'm going to notice on this chart, I want to show you 2 parts. We're going to start on the right. So we have 6 washings, 70 washings, and 70 washings. And the reason we have that on here, as well as the cost, minimal cost, a little bit more and a little bit more. So now we're going to put that in context. So go to the left side. So how do you get permethrin treated anything? First, you can do it yourself. You can buy products. Sawyer makes one, Ben's makes one, there's several. And you can spray your shoes. In fact, that's the only way to get treated shoes, to my knowledge, is that you self-treat them. And again, when you treat, you have to saturate whatever you're treating. And then you can also mail in your clothing for treatment. So you take your clothing, your pants, your shirts, and all that, and you send it in. They have a bulk rate, and then they have single garment rate. And Insect Shield is the company that is providing that service. In fact, they provide the service for most of the clothing you can buy, which is our third option. You can go to REI, Amazon, Dick's, Bass Pro, and see permethrin treated shorts and shirts and socks. In fact, for those of you that work out in the outdoors, Insect Shield has a whole line of clothing that you can purchase from them for people that are out working. So, more heavy duty type clothing. And so I encourage you to check out Insect Shield and to really consider permethrin treating clothes and your gear. So besides permethrin, you also want to tuck in your shirt. And to be quite honest, they always say tuck in your pants into your socks. But it's not a great fashion statement, isn't it? Is it? But let's say that you are one that really does spend a lot of time in the great outdoors, and you live in Brown County or wherever. So this is something important to think about. This adult stage black-legged tick, it says on there, it latches at the shin and knee level. So when they are now an adult, they are at the edge of forests, they're at the edge of trails, and they're hanging off, they're called questing, and they are questing off blades of grass, tall grass, maybe 2 feet, 18 inches. And so they will attach to those jeans and go straight under that shirt, straight up, and they have a way to get all the way up to your head or wherever they choose to land. So in the fall and winter, it's something to really think about, adding one more level of protection, just something to think about. And then just learned about this recently. You might want to consider another clothing product, the Rhino Skin Total. It's designed to be worn underneath the clothing. And a lot of hunters, I found this on a hunting website, that they really like that because it is insect free. It stops gnats and all different kinds of things. So it's something you may want to check out. So here's another strategy. This is something that it took a while for our family to get used to doing this, but what a difference it can make. So you notice this dryer in this washer. So what do we usually do with our dirty clothes? We stick them in the washer. But both the CDC and others that have tested, if you wash clothing and it has a deer tick on it, You will, and then put it in the dryer under normal circumstances, that deer tick will leave. It will live. You cannot get rid of it. So the only way to get rid of it is, again, it doesn't like heat and dryness. It needs moisture. So they found that if you throw your clothes in the dryer, so we call it dry first, wash second, that is how you can kill any ticks that are on your clothing. And again, when you think of those tiny ones, they're very hard to see. So think about a new way of coming into your home after you've been out in tick habitat. Throw your clothes in the dryer, and then, which you probably are aware of, you do a tick check. And again, you start low and you go high. Everywhere that you could think a tick might hide. Feet between the toes, the ankles, behind the knees, in the legs, the pelvic, the waist, belly button, back, underarms, ears, in and around, and the scalp, under the hairline. So on our website, we have something called the Tick Check Challenge. There is a song that was put out by PA Lyme, and it's wonderful. And it is an action song for children to learn how to do their own tick checks. And so it's just a resource that you might want to know about. So come back inside, throw your clothes in the dryer, do a tick check, and grab a shower. So with those 3 steps, and the other prevention, your chances of getting a tick bite and to get Lyme disease has been greatly, greatly reduced. But if all the prevention in the world, you find yourself with a tick bite, don't panic. Be ready and have the proper instrument on hand so that you're ready for this next slide. So tick removal tricks. There are several that I want to point out. So this one right here is your standard tweezer, but that's not what you're looking for. You need to be prepared. You want a sharp, tiny, pointy tweezer. So that's what you want in your toolbox. Keep one in your car, keep one in your home. Second, something like this is an instrument, a key. It's called a tick key. I keep one on my keychain. And so you put the head of the body of the tick here, and you slowly start moving the keychain until the head is here, and that will hold it. Then there's other things you can buy, something like a tickies. It both has an end for both dogs and for humans. So grab and have available ahead of time before a tick bite the proper tools. And what you're not going to do is you're not going to use a dull one. You're not going to use any chemical like rubbing alcohol, nail polish, or petroleum jelly. And you're not going to use any heat source. You will not, it will not benefit you. So what do we do? Well, the first thing is you're going to grab as closely as you can between the skin and the head of the tick. And you may have to use the head, but what you do not want to do is touch the body of the tick. If you go and squeeze it, you're squeezing all those germs through the mouth and into your body. So you want to take that. That's why you want that is why you want to have that sharp, pointy device. And then to pull upwards with a slow, steady pressure. Do not twist or jerk. You're trying to pull the tick so that it releases. So that's what you're looking for. And then thoroughly clean the area. And then consider sending it the tick ID to Tick Spotters with that picture, that app that I was telling you about. And then lastly, you might want to consider tick testing. Tick Report is one of many out there. Igenics Lab out in California is a good one. I do not believe, the last thing I heard is Purdue is not set up for testing. But what's really nice about it, there's controversy, should you or should you not test a tick? And basically, you can go on our website and read, but for a lot of people, it's peace of mind. Thinking if they end up with a rash or they end up sick, it's one more piece of evidence they can take to a physician and say, look, this tick tested positive for these diseases. So it can be a tool, but it shouldn't be a tool alone, because if you get one tick submitted and it's fine, but then you had others that you missed and they had disease, then you had peace of mind when really you shouldn't. But it is a tool that many have found helpful. So what do you do if you develop symptoms? The early signs are flu-like symptoms, fatigue, headache, fever, rash of any kind. And again, that bullseye is diagnostic for Lyme. Joint pain, Bell's palsy, those are all more early-like signs. And then we already talked at the beginning about late stage, but call your doctor. Be sure to inform them that you have had a risk of a tick bite. And they may not know that Indiana has black-legged ticks. They may not know that there's Lyme disease with black-legged ticks, so you can help inform. Be persistent to get treatment, just like Liz said. She was really blessed that they got early treatment. My family did not because I wasn't aware, and we ended up with a mess. Testing is a whole nother, it's beyond the scope of this presentation, but don't rely on tests is the message. The testing was created for surveillance testing, not diagnostic. It's not as sensitive. So don't rely on tests. And also you haven't built up antibodies probably by the time you're getting it. And you remember you don't have to have a rash, but if you do, it is diagnostic. And be your own advocate. As you heard in my story, it took devotion, it took reading, it took even going out of state at that time before we could get diagnosed and begin our path to relatively wellness. And if your symptoms persist, if you are given an antibiotic, but you find that you're still sick afterwards, seek further medical advice. We get a lot of people that contact us, they're in that position. So prevention in a nutshell. Remember to be tick aware year round. It's different in the summer and than it is in the winter, but still be tick aware. You can reduce your tick habitat in your yard. You can spray the perimeter. You can keep the grass short. You can place wood piles, bird feeders to another part of the yard. Consider using tick tubes around stone walls and wood piles and leaf litter, and remove leaf litter. And number 3, treat your clothes, shoes, socks, and gear with permethrin. Research has shown that is the best way to protect yourself. And number 4, tuck in your shirts and pants. Number 5, protect your pet and groom them before they come out in. And after coming back indoors, consider drying your clothes and then washing them. Take a shower and perform a tick check. And then number 6, remove a tick safely and watch for symptoms of illness. And you may want to consider using the Tick Spotters ID, consider tick testing, and be your own advocate. So that's our prevention in a nutshell, as best as I could get through it. For more information, this is what we're working with is Tick Encounter, because they are about science-based, practical, doable ways for prevention. And for Lyme disease, there's a variety of organizations. That's all they specialize in. LymeDisease.org. iLads is an organization for collecting scientific research. And then there's a new film that you'll be seeing coming out. It's called The Quiet Epidemic, and it's a Lyme documentary. It was at the Heartland Film Festival this fall, and it is now, you can sponsor those around the state, and ILC will come and provide prevention materials. So that's more information. And on our website, you can find, we have all kinds of brochures, and we try to keep it as up to date as possible. And then if you want to make a difference, you have an opportunity to join Purdue's Tick Insiders program. We each year, about twice a year, we make appeals. And what it's doing, it's asking the average citizen to help with tick drags, which is that surveillance problem. And they'll teach you how to do it, and we'll help you do it safely. And with the, using some of these tick prevention things, and you can submit and be a part of helping us do more data around the state on the variety of ticks that are out there. So we're really thankful for Purdue, but they need help from average citizens. And if you want to make a difference, you could join us. We're going to be at the Indiana Flower and Patio Show. We can always look for volunteers, and we do our annual race with the 500 Festival, the mini marathon. And so you are welcome to join us. And if you want more information, just go to our website. And I'm ready for questions.
Great. Thank you, LeAnne. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. You gave us several good suggestions that I hadn't thought of, and I'm sure others hadn't either. I'm going to moderate some questions from the box now. We may go over a few minutes, so if anybody needs to bug out, we understand, but there aren't too many questions in there. Before I take the questions in the box, I did want to clarify something. My understanding is that permethrin is for products and objects only, not for skin. That is correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you need to follow directions because there's qualifiers. It's not safe on the skin when it's wet. I mean, it's not dangerous, but it's not something that you would use for prevention. And secondly, it's dangerous when it's in a liquid form for aquatic life and for cats. But yes, that's a very good clarifying question.
Okay. Bill asked, what percentage of tick bites develop into disease?
So if it is infected, then you have the disease. Now it can stay dormant, but right now when it's the nymph stage, which is those little poppy seed, and those are going to be coming out maybe even a little sooner, but usually it's April, May, all the way through summer. Right now, the research is saying 1 in 4 are carrying the bacteria. So do we know, Bill, that's a good question. Do we know that if everyone who gets bit with the Lyme bacteria will develop Lyme? I don't know if we have an answer to that, but we do know that you can also, just like chickenpox, you can have the virus and it stays dormant and then it becomes as shingles. It is the same thing, even what we saw with our kids. Why did all of a sudden they just crash? Well, they were ramping up their stressors in their life as they were graduating and trying to go off to school, and their immune system crashed. So we do not know how many are infected, but we do know with the dog data in Indiana that 1 in 30 dogs have tested positive when they've been bitten. So that's the best answer I can give you.
And related to dogs, why is Lyme disease vaccination available for dogs, but not for their owners?
Great question. It's beyond the scope, but it's something every one of us that has been affected has asked that same question. There was a Lyme vaccine for people, and it was pulled off the market. You can go to LymeDisease.org and read the complete story behind that. There's 2 sides to every story. One says it was taken off the market and it shouldn't, and then you have the others that experienced getting Lyme disease from the vaccine, and which is why it was taken out. There is one now that is in development, but I don't know if it's at stage 2, but there are people working on it.
Ari asked, what kind of insecticide could be sprayed in your yard?
Yeah, and I didn't name it, but I would encourage, and the reason is because the research was changing, and but my husband uses permethrin. That's what he sprays, but I don't have an answer, the best answer, but I would go onto the University of Rhode Island, to the ticking counter website. They have a whole segment on yards, and they keep and spraying, and they add new information on there. So that's where I would refer you to go.
Sarah said, what was the name of the lab you suggested? It was during the picture of the yard, and you were talking about sending something to California.
Okay. So there's 2. There's called Tick Report, and that's if you want the tick itself to be tested for different DNA testing to find out what it's carrying, what diseases it has. And that's at Tick Report. And then there's one called IGeneX that's in California. And those are 2. And IGeneX is also the testing lab that is very prominent in the Lyme world for having accurate and more sensitive testing for Lyme disease itself for people. And then there's Tick Spotters, which is just using your phone, taking a picture and submitting it to ID the tick and what kind of tick you're dealing with.
Okay. Sarah said, I thought scientists say that ticks have been bitten for more than 24 hours to transmit the disease, probably biting a person. So just because they have the disease doesn't mean that it will be transmitted in a bite if the tick is removed quickly.
So there is a lot of information out there and misinformation, and it's something that we've had to encounter. I can tell you personally, we know many, many people that thought that originally, I think it said it had to be, I don't know, like 3 days or 2 days or something like that. But there are many people who report when they found that tick and it was shown that the engorgement showed that it was less than a day, ended up with disease. So there is still a lot for all of us to learn. But I would say this is our policy in our house. If you get bitten by a tick, we take it seriously, no matter if it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. We take it and we look for symptoms. And that has actually, we have one of our kids did get bitten, and now that I think about it, that's right. It would have been a day and a half before he found it. And he did get reinfected. So, you know, the science is still out. They're still learning, but to say and dismiss it, you meet the people who have the disease, and almost all of them who do recall a tick bite that did have it would say that they would not dismiss anything just because it's under 24 hours. But yes, the longer it feeds, especially a black-legged tick, the greater the chances. Other ticks transmit much faster, but I'm not a tick expert. We'll leave that to Purdue.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. I think that those were great questions.
I agree.
There, Susan was asking about the links, and I think I did get her the link she needed. Those were great questions, and you did a great job of clarifying some of this very important but somewhat confusing information, as you mentioned in the myths. There's a lot confusion in this realm. So again, we want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us. You know, it's such an important topic for us, and we appreciate you doing that. I want to apologize for the trouble that many of you had in getting the link tonight. I'm not quite sure what happened there. It worked out well last month, and we'll make sure it works out better next month if you're going to join us again. And next month, the topic is observing seasonal change. We're going to learn about phenology and how to recognize changes in the seasons, from bud break to flowering to birds changing their behavior, and that will be quite interesting. We hope you enjoyed our talk tonight, and thank you for joining us. If you're interested in forestry, we'd love to hear back from you. I'll send a follow-up email and talk about some upcoming events and notify all of you when this recording is available, so you can view it in the future if you'd like, or share it with others. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.